Perhaps. He didn't sound convinced. He opened the manila folder, pulled out photocopied pages. These are from the parish registry. Lists of organizations that use the building. Most are standard. Knights of Columbus, Ladies Auxiliary Youth Group. But look at this entry from 1974 to 1979. I read the line he indicated. Sisters of Scientific Inquiry. Use of basement classroom, Wednesday evenings. I found that entry when I was cleaning out the office. Never saw a group by that name. Never found any records of what they did in that classroom. I asked some of the older parishioners. A few remembered nuns coming and going. One woman said they were always carrying boxes of wires. That's all anyone could recall. The basement. I hadn't been down there yet. The stairs looked sketchy and I'd been working alone. There's one more thing. Father Tom pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and fragile. I found this tucked inside a hymnal. It's a receipt. Parish donation for materials procurement, signed by someone named M. Shaw. $700 in 1977. That was significant money for a working-class parish. I looked at the receipt. The signature was neat, feminine, confident. M. Shaw. Do you know who that is? No. He refolded the paper carefully, handed it to me. But if I were you, I'd start in the basement. And I'd take someone with you. The stairs aren't safe, and neither is going alone. After he left, I sat in a pew and opened the first hymn ledger. The entries were neat at first. Service dates, hymn numbers, occasional notes about tempo or soloists. Standard church record-keeping. Then I found the margins. Starting in 1975, someone had begun making marks around specific hymns. Circles around certain notes. Bars connecting measures that didn't logically connect. It wasn't vandalism. It was too precise, too consistent. The ink was the same throughout, a blue ballpoint pen used with deliberate care. I flipped through faster, watching the pattern develop. The markings intensified through 1977, peaked in 1978, then stopped abruptly in February 1979. After that, clean margins. No more annotations. I spread 3 ledgers out on a pew, comparing marked pages. The hymns themselves varied. Some were traditional, some contemporary for the era. But the marked notes followed a pattern I couldn't decode. It wasn't musical notation I recognized. It looked more like coordinates. Or a cipher. The organ exhaled again. I'd been so focused on the ledgers, I hadn't noticed the shift in air pressure. The sound rose from the same deep subsonic register, felt more than heard. This time it lasted longer. 10 seconds, 15. The pews vibrated faintly. The hanging light fixtures swayed on their chains. Then silence. I closed the ledgers carefully, retied the twine, and walked to the organ console. Ran my fingers across the keys without pressing them. The dust was undisturbed, except where I'd touched yesterday. Someone had tuned this building to sound when it shouldn't. Someone had marked hymnals in code and paid significant money for materials. Someone named M. Shaw had done something in the basement that required Wednesday evenings and boxes of wires. And someone had brought crates into this building in the middle of the night, right before it closed forever. I pulled out my phone, started a new note titled, Questions That Need Answers. 1. What's in the basement? 2. Who was M. Shaw? 3. What makes an organ breathe when no one's playing it? 4. What were the Sisters of Scientific Inquiry really doing? 5. Why does everyone avoid this block? I was adding a 6th question when I heard footsteps on the front steps. The kid was maybe 17, wearing a hoodie with the name of a band I didn't recognize, carrying a camera gimbal rig that probably cost more than my car. They paused in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun, and I watched them clock the space with the quick, systematic scan of someone who'd explored a lot of abandoned buildings. You the new owner? Their voice was careful, neutral. Riley Boone. And you are? Z. Calder. They stepped inside, already filming. I do urban exploration videos. This place has been on my list for 2 years, but it was locked up tight. Figured new ownership might mean access. They glanced at me. Was I wrong? I should have said yes. Liability, insurance, common sense. But something about the way they moved told me this wasn't their first time navigating hostile architecture. And I needed help I could trust more than I needed perfect safety protocols. What's your subscriber count? 43,000. They said it matter of fact, not bragging. If I let you film, I get copies of everything you shoot. And you don't post anything until I approve it. Fair. Z was already adjusting settings on their camera. What am I looking for? I don't know yet. That's the problem, they grinned. Those are my favorite kind of projects. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We walked the nave together. I showed them the newer floorboards, the gouged locks, the hymnal markings. Z listened without interrupting, occasionally stopping to film details I'd pointed out. When we reached the organ, they unpacked a small case and pulled out a device that looked like a phone crossed with a radar gun. Sound meter, they explained, measures frequency and amplitude. Urban explorers use them to find structural problems. Walls hum at specific frequencies when they're failing. They powered it on, swept it across the organ console. The screen lit up with wavy lines and numbers that meant nothing to me. Huh? What? You're getting a persistent tone at 19 hertz. That's below normal hearing range, but humans can sense it physically. It's called infrasound. They moved closer to the pipes, watching their screen. 19 hertz specifically can cause anxiety, feelings of dread, visual hallucinations from eyeball resonance. Some paranormal investigators call it the ghost frequency. You're saying this place is haunted by physics. I'm saying someone built a really good deterrent into the architecture. They walked the length of the organ, taking readings. The frequency is coming from the pipes themselves. Not playing, just resonating, like they're tuned to catch environmental vibrations and amplify them at exactly the frequency that makes humans uncomfortable. Can that happen naturally? Sure, but this is too consistent. Too precisely 19 hertz across multiple pipe sets. Z looked up from their device. Someone did this on purpose. Probably whoever installed or last tuned this thing. The implications settled over me like cold water. To keep people away. Bingo. They swept the meter toward the altar. And you've got hotspots. Here, by the lectern. Strong signal. And they walked toward the newer floorboards I'd noticed. Right here. Strongest reading in the whole building. What's under there? Only one way to find out. We spent an hour mapping the sound signatures. Z had an app on their phone that could visualize the data in 3D, showing hotspots and resonant nodes. The pattern that emerged looked intentional. The strongest signals formed a rough circle around the altar, with a dense cluster directly beneath where the newer boards had been laid. Whoever replaced this floor, Z said, crouching to examine the wood grain, they were either covering up or covering something. And they wanted it found eventually, or they wouldn't have made it so obvious. It's not obvious. I only noticed because I was looking for damage. You noticed because you know how to look. Most people don't. They stood, brushed dust off their knees. There's something else. Come here. They led me to the side of the organ console, to a narrow gap between the bench and the wall. In the shadows, barely visible, was a small wooden panel about the size of a paperback book, set flush with the wall. Maintenance access, Z said. Old organs have them all over for tuning and repair. But this one's got a keyhole. I leaned closer. They were right. A tiny brass keyhole, tarnished nearly black. The loft key? Z suggested. I pulled out Mrs. Rivers' key, tried it. Too small. I tried the other keys on the ring from the deed. Fifth one clicked. The panel swung inward on tiny hinges, revealing a hollow space packed with yellowed newspaper and a leather pouch. Z filmed over my shoulder as I carefully extracted the pouch. It was brittle, stiff with age. Inside were 3 items. A coil of magnetic tape, a small folded paper covered in handwritten notes, and a black and white photograph of 6 nuns standing in front of a chalkboard covered with equations. The back of the photo had a date, June 1977, and a name, written in the same hand I'd seen on the donation receipt, Sister Magdalene Shaw. PhD, you're M. Shaw, Z said quietly. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was small, precise, scientific. It started with a date, August 15th, 1977, and a simple sentence that made my heart kick. If you're reading this, they tried to bury us. Don't let them. The rest was technical. References to cell structures, voltage measurements, temperature stability tests. I didn't understand most of it, but one phrase jumped out, circled 3 times. Working solid-state room temperature battery, non-flammable, reproducible. Holy shit, Z breathed. Is that what I think it is? If it's real, that's the kind of tech that would be worth... They trailed off, calculating. Millions. Maybe billions if it's scalable. I looked at the magnetic tape. We need to know what's on this. I know a place. Z was already packing up their gimbal. AV department at the community college. They've got equipment for digitizing old media formats. My cousin works there? Now? You want to wait? I looked at the photograph. 6 nuns, smiling like they'd just solved a puzzle nobody else could see. Sister Magdalene Shaw stood in the center holding what looked like a small metal box. No, I didn't want to wait. Let's go. But as we walked toward the door, Z's sound meter began chirping frantically. They looked down at the screen, then up at me. Riley. The 19 hertz just spiked to 23. Someone's in here. Or something just changed. We both heard it then. Not the organ's subsonic breathing. Footsteps upstairs. In the choir loft, slow, deliberate, coming toward the stairs. The footsteps stopped at the top of the choir loft. Stairs. Z and I stood frozen in the nave. Their sound meter still chirping its warning. I could see the loft railing from where we stood, but the angle was wrong to see who was up there. Heavy breathing echoed down. Labored elderly breathing, Mrs. Rivers. I called up, a pause. Then, saw you two go in. Figured you'd find something eventually. Her cane tapped the stairs as she descended slowly, gripping the rail. Took you less time than I expected. You have a key? Z asked. Had one made in 1985 when they wouldn't give me access to fix a broken hymnal rack. This building and I have an understanding. She reached the bottom, slightly winded. What did you find? I showed her the leather pouch, the photograph, Sister Magdalene's note. Her face went soft. Maggie Shaw. Should have known she'd leave breadcrumbs. She touched the photograph gently. Smartest woman I ever met. Had a doctorate from Carnegie Mellon. Came back here to teach and ended up in a habit because she said the church was the only place she could do real work without men taking credit. What kind of work? I asked. She called it energy storage research. The oil crisis made it clear we needed alternatives, and she wasn't waiting for permission to find them. Mrs. Rivers looked at the magnetic tape in my hand. Is that from the lab? You knew about the lab. Everyone knew. We just didn't talk about it. The sisters needed privacy, and the parish needed their donations to keep the lights on. Symbiotic relationship. She gestured to the tape. You planning to listen to that or just hold it? Z's cousin worked the AV lab graveyard shift at the community college, which was lucky because I wasn't sure I could wait until morning. The lab was tucked in the basement of the media building. A cramped room full of humming equipment and the particular smell of old electronics warming up. This is archival grade, Z's cousin Marcus said, threading the tape onto a reel-to-reel machine with the care of a surgeon. Someone knew what they were doing when they recorded this. He adjusted levels, checked connections, then pressed play. Static, then a voice, clear and measured, with a hint of Pittsburgh vowels underneath the professional diction. This is Sister Magdalene Shaw, documenting prototype trials for what we're calling the room temperature ceramic cell. Trial Series 7, dated November 2nd, 1977. If you're listening to this, it means we either succeeded beyond our ability to protect it or failed to protect it at all. I'm hoping for the former. The tape hissed for a moment. Papers rustled in the background. Our work began 3 years ago when the oil embargo made it clear that energy independence wasn't just a political talking point. It was survival. The parish needed heat. The neighborhood needed power they could afford. The existing battery technologies were too expensive, too dangerous, or too dependent on materials we couldn't source ethically. So we started over. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering her thoughts. The breakthrough came from Sister Patricia's ceramics work. She'd been experimenting with solid electrolytes for a devotional project, don't ask, it's complicated, and noticed unusual conductivity in certain mixtures when fired at specific temperatures. We expanded from there. 18 months of trials, every Wednesday evening, every spare hour. The parish thought we were running a science club for neighborhood kids. We were, technically. But the real work happened after they went home. Z was filming the tape machine, capturing every word. Mrs. Rivers sat perfectly still, eyes closed, listening. What we've achieved is this: a solid-state battery that operates safely at room temperature, uses no flammable components, maintains charge density comparable to contemporary lithium cells, and can be manufactured with readily available materials. The prototype currently powers the Cathedral organ's blower system. It's been running for 3 months without recharge, without degradation, without incident. My heart was hammering. The organ runs on battery power. Marcus held up a hand for silence. The tape continued. We attempted to license the technology through proper channels. First the diocese, then the university, then directly to manufacturers. Every door closed. The utility company made it clear, through unofficial channels, that any building housing our research would face condemnation proceedings. They called it safety concerns. We called it what it was: suppression of competitive technology. Her voice hardened. So we're burying it. Not destroying it, burying it. The prototypes, the journals, the manufacturing protocols. Everything goes into the cathedral itself, coded into the music we sing every Sunday, hidden in the architecture of worship. The organ becomes the map. The hymns become the key. Whoever finds this has already started solving the puzzle. Static rose for a moment, then cleared. To whoever is listening, we built a battery that doesn't burn. We built it with cast-off equipment and church donation money, and the kind of stubborn hope that probably looks naive from wherever you're standing. But it works, and if it works here, it can work anywhere. Don't let them bury it twice. The neighborhood deserves better. The future deserves better. The math doesn't lie even if the men in suits do. The tape ended with a soft click. We sat in silence for a long moment. Marcus was the first to speak. Did she just say she invented revolutionary battery technology in a church basement in 1977? Yes, Mrs. Rivers said quietly. Yes, she did. We went back at 3 a.m., my idea. Fewer eyes, fewer questions, and if we were going to pull up floorboards in a building I technically owned, but barely understood, I wanted darkness as cover. Z brought lights. Father Tom brought a pry bar, and guilt he was clearly trying to work through. Mrs. Rivers brought her cane and a thermos of coffee that tasted like it could strip paint. I should have fought harder, Tom said as we stood around the altar looking at the newer pine boards. When they pressured us to close, when the rumors started about safety violations, I should have asked what they were really protecting. You're here now, Mrs. Rivers said. That's what counts. The boards came up easier than I expected. Someone had used screws instead of nails, meant to be opened again, not sealed forever. Beneath the pine was a layer of newer concrete, maybe 6 inches thick, poured directly over older stone. And set into the concrete, a rubber-lined shaft about 3 feet deep. At the bottom sat a steel casket the size of a large toolbox, marked with a simple painted cross and a hand-stenciled biohazard symbol that looked more hopeful than official. That's either the world's strangest relic or exactly what we're looking for, Z said, filming everything. I climbed down into the shaft. The casket had a simple clasp, no lock. Someone had wrapped the seal with electrical tape that cracked when I peeled it away. Inside, packed in foam rubber, cut to fit, one shoebox-sized device with ceramic layers visible through a clear housing panel. Terminals at each end, wiring harness bundled neatly beside it, 3 notebooks bound in leather, pages covered in handwritten equations and sketches and notes in margins, another reel of magnetic tape, and a manila envelope containing what looked like manufacturing instructions, each step illustrated with the precision of someone who expected others to follow them. Is that it? Father Tom's voice was hushed, almost reverent. "Is that the battery?" "That's a battery," I said, lifting it carefully. It was heavier than I expected, dense. Whether it's the battery remains to be seen. We'd just set everything on the altar when we heard the front door rattle. Not wind, not settling. Someone testing the lock with purpose. Z killed the lights. We froze, listening. The door rattled again, then stopped. Footsteps moved around the building's exterior, checking windows, looking for entry points. "Back exit," Mrs. Rivers whispered, "through the sacristy." We moved fast and quiet, grabbing what we could. I took the battery and one journal. Z had their camera. Father Tom scooped up the rest. We made it to the sacristy door just as we heard glass breaking somewhere in the nave. The alley behind the cathedral was dark and narrow. We ran 2 blocks before slowing, breathing hard, looking back. No one followed. But I could see a light moving inside the cathedral through the broken window. "Someone's searching," Z said. "Someone knew we'd be there tonight." I looked at the battery in my hands, then at the others. "We can't take this home. If they found us once, they'll find us again." "My house," Mrs. Rivers said firmly. "They've ignored me for 17 years. They'll keep ignoring me." We reconvened in her living room at 4 a.m., exhausted and wired on adrenaline. The battery sat on her kitchen table like a small, impossible fact. Z was downloading footage to 3 separate drives. Father Tom was reading the journal I'd grabbed, his face pale in the lamplight. "She did it," he said. "Every test, every iteration, she documented it all. This isn't theory. This is a working prototype with manufacturing specifications." "Who else knew about this?" I asked Mrs. Rivers. "The sisters. The parish board, maybe, though Maggie was careful about what she disclosed. And, she paused. The utility sent someone to meet with Father Howard, the priest before Tom. This was 1979, right before Maggie died. They made an offer to partner on innovative energy solutions. Father Howard turned them down." "How did Sister Magdalene die?" Z asked quietly. "Car accident." Mrs. Rivers's voice was flat. "Single vehicle, drove off a bridge on a clear night. Investigators said she fell asleep at the wheel. She was 41 years old and in perfect health." The silence that followed was heavy. "We need to secure this," I said finally. "Get it documented, verified, put somewhere they can't disappear it." "They'll try," Father Tom said. "If this technology is real, it's real." Z had been running voltage tests with a multimeter. "It's outputting 3.7 volts steady. No drain, no heat, no degradation I can measure. This thing has been buried for years, and it's still holding charge." A car rolled past outside, slow. We all watched through the curtains until it was gone. "They're going to come for it," Mrs. Rivers said, "and they're going to come for you." He arrived at 9 a.m. with a smile that probably cost $10,000 in orthodontics. "Ms. Boone? I'm Evan Voss. I understand you've encountered some difficulties with your recent acquisition." He stood on the cathedral steps in a suit that fit too well to be off the rack, holding a leather portfolio and radiating the kind of calm that came from never having heard the word no applied to himself. "I'd come back to assess the damage from the break-in. Someone had searched thoroughly but carefully, moving things but not destroying them. Professional. That scared me more than random vandalism would have." "Define difficulties," I said. "Structural concerns. Code violations. The unfortunate reality that historic properties often harbor hazardous materials." He gestured around. "Buildings like this can become very expensive very quickly. I'm here to propose a solution that benefits everyone involved." "I didn't realize I'd involved anyone else." His smile never wavered. "Voss Energy has been a partner in urban renewal initiatives throughout this region for 3 generations. When we heard about your purchase, we wanted to ensure you had support." He opened the portfolio, pulled out a folder. "We're prepared to offer comprehensive assistance, safety inspections, code compliance, even help with renovation costs." All we ask is partnership status and first right of refusal should you decide to sell. Partnership status meaning what exactly? Joint ownership, 50-50 split. You maintain creative control over the restoration. We handle the complicated logistics. Why? The smile tightened microscopically. Because we believe in this community. Mr. Voss, I bought this building 3 days ago, and you're already here with contract language. That suggests you believe in something specific about this property. Before he could answer, a truck pulled up. 2 men got out wearing city inspector uniforms that looked legitimate enough. Behind them came another man, older, with the build of someone who'd worked construction before graduating to pointing at things other people should lift. Ms. Boone. The man approached with a handshake that was more grab than greeting. Lincoln Voss. I'm Evan's cousin. I manage facility assessments for the family. We've identified several urgent code violations that need immediate attention. Funny. I haven't had an inspection yet. Anonymous complaint triggered an expedited review. He pulled out a clipboard. We've documented structural instabilities, potential asbestos exposure, unauthorized modifications to the electrical system, and, most concerning, evidence of recent excavation that wasn't properly permitted. My stomach went cold. You've been inside. Inspectors have right of entry for emergency safety concerns. He flipped pages on his clipboard. I'm afraid we'll need to confiscate any materials removed during unpermitted excavation. Hazardous waste protocols, you understand. I understand you're bluffing. Lincoln's smile was different from his cousin's, sharper. Ma'am, we're trying to help. Buildings like this get condemned every day. Owners get stuck with demolition costs and property liens. We're offering you a way out that doesn't end with bankruptcy. A cane tapped the sidewalk behind me. Link Voss? Mrs. Rivers moved to stand beside me. Didn't recognize you without a crowbar. Been, 17 years since you boarded up that side entrance? His expression flickered. Mrs. Rivers, lovely to see you. I still have the ledger, you know. The one listing who authorized the emergency closure. Funny thing about ledgers, they remember what people forget. She turned to me. These men's grandfather sat on the energy board. Made a lot of money buying distressed infrastructure. Family tradition, you might say. Evan stepped forward smoothly. Mrs. Rivers, I'm sure we can discuss any historical concerns in a more appropriate venue. Right now, we're focused on safety. Safety! She laughed once, sharp as breaking glass. You're focused on whatever Miss Boone found under those floorboards. Same thing you were focused on when you convinced the diocese to close this parish. Same thing your grandfather was focused on when Sister Magdalene drove off that bridge. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. That's a serious accusation, Evan said quietly. One I'd be careful about repeating. A 4th vehicle pulled up. City police. Officer Marisol Quinto stepped out, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd answered too many calls to waste energy. Got a report about a trespass incident here last night. Which one of you owns the property? I do, I said, grateful my voice stayed level. And these gentlemen, they're leaving, I said, looking at Evan Voss. Right now. Quinto looked at the shattered window, then at Lincoln's clipboard. You conduct an inspection without a warrant or the owner's permission? Emergency powers don't apply without active danger. I don't see fire. I don't see structural collapse. I see a broken window that looks pretty recent. Her eyes were sharp. Might want to review your protocols before the next inspection. The Voss cousins exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Then Evan closed his portfolio with a soft snap. Miss Boone, the offer stands. When you're ready to discuss terms, you'll find my office very accommodating. He handed me a business card that felt expensive. I'd encourage you not to wait too long. Properties in this condition. Things tend to escalate. They left. The inspectors left. Officer Quinto stayed. You want to file a breaking and entering report? She asked. I want to know how they knew I'd be here this morning. Good question. She looked at Mrs. Rivers. You mentioned a ledger. In my house. 17 years of dust on it, but the ink's still fresh enough. Quinto pulled out a notepad. I'd like to see that. And ma'am, this to me, whatever you found under those floorboards, you might want to document it thoroughly. Video, photos, witnesses. Things have a way of disappearing in cases like this. Cases like what? Cases where money meets inconvenient history. She handed me her card. Call me if you need. I've been looking for something that'll stick to the Voss family for 5 years. I'm a patient woman. We had to go back. The battery was safe at Mrs. Rivers's house, but the rest of the cash was still there, and I wasn't giving Voss a second chance to make it disappear. Officer Quinto agreed to be present for documentation purposes, which made everything feel slightly less like a heist and more like legitimate evidence collection. We returned at noon with Z, Father Tom, Mrs. Rivers, and 2 friends of Quinto's from the county recorder's office. I brought the marked hymnals, the tape transcripts, and a theory I developed over breakfast while staring at Sister Magdalene's cipher patterns. The markings aren't random, I'd told Z. They're coordinates, musical coordinates. Specific chords that trigger resonances in the building itself, like acoustic keys, exactly like acoustic keys. The organ isn't just powered by the battery. It's built to interact with hidden compartments. Specific chord combinations trip mechanical releases. Father Tom had looked up from his coffee. The last entry in the parish registry, the Sunday before we closed. The music selection was unusual. 3 hymns nobody requested, all in keys we rarely used, because they weren't meant to be hymns, I'd said. They were instructions. Now, standing at the organ console with Z holding the notated hymnals, I felt the full weight of what Sister Magdalene had built. Not just a battery, an entire system of preservation and protection, coded into the architecture of worship itself. C minor 7th, descending from upper register, Z read from the marked page. Then a sharp augmented 5th. I positioned my hands carefully. The organ still had residual power from the battery, or maybe the pipes themselves held enough resonance to matter. I pressed the keys. The sound was immediate and enormous. The pipes roared. The floor vibrated, and across the nave, near the transept wall, a section of wooden paneling that I'd assumed was decorative shifted half an inch outward with a soft click. Holy shit, one of the recorder's office staff breathed. We opened the panel carefully. Behind it, built into the wall cavity, was a metal document box sealed with wax that had cracked with age. Inside, microfilm reels containing manufacturing schematics, a donor list with highlighted names and amounts, a notarized letter from a Carnegie Mellon engineering professor, dated 1978, confirming the technology's viability and expressing interest in partnership. Letters from the utility company threatening regulatory intervention if the sisters' work continued, and photographs. Dozens of them. The sisters in their lab, Sister Magdalene smiling over a soldering iron, test rigs, prototype arrays, and one photo of men in suits examining the cathedral's exterior with a surveyor's equipment, dated 2 weeks before the parish closed. Officer Quinto photographed everything methodically. The recorder's office staff made notes. Father Tom sat in a pew, looking like he might cry or throw up or both. "This is evidence of suppression," Quinto said quietly. "Corporate interference with independent research. Possibly more, depending on what those letters contain. Can you protect it?" I asked. "I can document it. I can flag it as evidence in an ongoing investigation. Beyond that," she looked at me levelly, "you need to make this public fast, before they get creative with legal motions." Z was already uploading footage to cloud servers. Already on it. I've got the magnetic tape testimony, the prototype demonstration, and now this. I know 3 journalists who'd run this story tomorrow. Mrs. Rivers touched the photograph of Sister Magdalene. "She knew," she said softly. "She knew they'd try to bury it, so she built it into the bones of the building, made it part of the worship, made it impossible to erase without erasing everything. She was protecting it," Father Tom said. "And us, the parish? By hiding it here, she made sure we'd remain standing as long as the secret stayed hidden." "The secret's not hidden anymore," I said. A phone rang. Officer Quinto answered, listened, said thank you and hung up looking grimmer. That was my captain. Boss Energy just filed for an emergency injunction claiming hazardous materials on site. They're pushing for immediate city seizure pending proper remediation. How fast can that happen? 48 hours if the judge agrees. Then we have 48 hours to make them irrelevant. I looked at Z. How fast can you edit a 10-minute video? For this? 6 hours. Do it, Mrs. Rivers. Can you get that ledger to Officer Quinto, along with any other documentation you have about the closure? Done. Father Tom, I need you to contact every news outlet you know. Tell them about the nuns' research, the suppression, all of it. Make it too big to ignore. What are you going to do? I looked at the organ, at the hidden panel still open like a wound showing old bones. I'm going to prove it works publicly tomorrow morning. I'm going to power this organ on battery alone and invite everyone who cares to watch. Officer Quinto nodded slowly. That'll complicate their hazardous materials claim. That's the idea. They want to call it dangerous? Let's show them safe. They want to bury it? We'll make it too visible to hide. As everyone moved to their tasks, I stood alone for a moment in the nave. The afternoon light came through the stained glass in shafts of red and gold and blue. The organ pipes rose toward the ceiling like a forest of copper trees. Sister Magdalene Shaw had built a battery that could change how we lived. She'd coded its existence into music and stone. She'd died protecting it, and for 17 years it had waited in darkness for someone to ask the right questions. I wasn't going to let it wait any longer. Tomorrow, we'd make some noise. The morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of October day that made the river city look almost beautiful if you squinted past the rust stains and cracked pavement. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., running through contingencies and checking connections I barely understood. Z had worked through the night editing footage. Father Tom had called in favors from every journalist contact he'd cultivated over 30 years of ministry. Mrs. Rivers had stationed herself on her porch with binoculars and a phone tree of neighbors she'd known since the Kennedy administration. By 8 a.m., we had 47 people gathered in the nave, local news, 2 regional papers, a blogger who covered energy policy, a professor from the community college engineering department, neighbors who'd avoided this block for years but came when Mrs. Rivers called, city council members, and Officer Quinto standing near the door with her partner, both in uniform, both watching carefully. The battery sat on a rolling cart near the organ console, connected via a junction box Z and I had rigged with help from Marcus, and a very nervous electrical engineering student who kept muttering about liability waivers. The setup was crude but functional. Power from the battery through a voltage regulator into the organ's blower system. We're ready when you are, Z said quietly. Camera already recording. I stepped up to the makeshift podium, really just the lectern moved to face the crowd, and felt the weight of 47 pairs of eyes, plus whoever would watch this later online. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the lectern. My name is Riley Boone. 3 weeks ago, I bought this cathedral for $100. What I found inside was worth considerably more than that. I gestured to the battery. In 1977, a group of nuns led by Sister Magdalene Shaw developed a working solid-state battery using materials they purchased with church donations and equipment cast off from the university. They documented every step. They tested it rigorously. And when they tried to share it with manufacturers and utilities, they were threatened with building condemnation if they continued. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pressed on, so they buried it. They hid their prototypes and research journals in this building, coded the locations into hymnal notations, and built an acoustic cipher into the organ itself. Sister Magdalene died in 1979 under circumstances that were ruled accidental. The parish closed in 2008 after pressure from interests that wanted this technology to stay buried. But it didn't stay buried. We found it, and today we're proving it works. I nodded to Z. They threw the switch. The battery's LED indicator glowed steady green. Power flowed through the regulator. The organ's blower motor hummed to life with a sound like a giant taking a breath. Air filled the pipes. The whole instrument vibrated with potential energy, ready to sing. I sat at the console, hands on the keys, and played the chord progression Sister Magdalene had marked in the hymnals. C minor 7th descending. The nave filled with sound, deep, resonant, beautiful. The pipes sang like they'd been waiting 17 years for this moment. I held the chord for 30 seconds, then released it. The sound decayed slowly, reverberating through stone and wood and glass. In the silence that followed, I heard someone crying quietly. Father Tom, I thought, though I didn't look. This organ is running entirely on battery power, I said. A battery that's been buried since before most of you were born. No fire risk, no toxic materials, steady voltage output. Sister Magdalene and her community built this with 1970s technology and pocket change. Imagine what we could build now if we chose to, the engineering professor stood. May I examine the connections? Please. He approached carefully, respectfully, like he was meeting something holy. Pulled out a multimeter, took readings, checked the junction box, studied the battery housing. The room waited. He looked up, face pale. It's real, he said simply. The output is stable. The cell structure visible through the housing is consistent with ceramic solid-state designs that contemporary research suggested were impossible at scale. He stopped, recalibrated. This is extraordinary. A journalist raised her hand. Do you have documentation? Manufacturing specs? Proof of the suppression claims? Z connected their laptop to the projection screen I'd borrowed from the community college. The video started playing. Sister Magdalene's voice filled the nave, calm and precise, explaining what they'd built and why they'd hidden it. Then came the scanned letters from the utility, the timeline of threats, the photographs of men surveying the building weeks before closure. The room was absolutely silent except for the video. When it ended, the journalist was typing furiously on her phone. So were 3 other people. That's when Evan Voss walked in. He moved through the crowd like water finding downhill, inevitable and smooth. Lincoln followed, along with 2 people I recognized from City Hall. Evan's expression was unreadable, but something in the set of his shoulders told me he was recalculating rapidly. Impressive demonstration, Ms. Boone. His voice carried easily through the nave. I see you've shared some historical artifacts. I wonder if you've also considered the legal complications of possessing what amounts to undocumented intellectual property with unclear ownership chains. The sisters documented everything, I said, including their repeated attempts to license the technology through legitimate channels. Attempts that were blocked by entities affiliated with your family's business interests. That's a serious allegation. It's a documented fact. Officer Quinto has the evidence logged. Multiple journalists now have copies. The university engineering department is reviewing the technical specifications. I paused. You can't bury this anymore, Mr. Voss. It's already sunlight. He studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was different from his previous smiles. This one had resignation in it and something almost like respect. Perhaps we've approached this incorrectly, he said. May we speak privately? Officer Quinto stepped forward. Any conversation happens here in public or at the station with proper recording. Evan glanced at her, then back to me. Very well. Ms. Boone, Voss Energy would like to make a formal offer. Full acquisition of the property, the technology, and all associated documentation. We're prepared to offer $12 million. Immediate payment. No strings. You walk away a wealthy woman, and we handle the complicated development and implementation process. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, someone whistling low. $12 million for a building I'd bought for $100 and a battery I'd found by accident. I looked at the organ, at the battery glowing steady on its cart, at Mrs. Rivers in the front pew, watching me with those sharp eyes, at Father Tom, who'd carried guilt for 17 years, at Z, filming everything channels their grief into building something new, at the neighborhood people who'd come because Mrs. Rivers called, who lived here when the power was expensive and the winters were cold. No, I said. Evan's smile froze. I'm sorry? No, this technology doesn't belong to me, and it sure as hell doesn't belong to Voss Energy. It belongs to Sister Magdalene Shaw and the community she tried to serve. I'm just the person who found it. That doesn't make me its owner. That makes me its steward. Miss Boone, be reasonable. 12 million isn't enough to justify erasing 17 years of suppression and 47 years of potential progress. This goes public. The specifications, the research, all of it. Open source. Available to anyone who wants to build on what the sisters started. Lincoln stepped forward, face reddening. You're making a mistake. We can make this very difficult for you. Officer Quinto moved between us. Sir, that sounded like a threat. In front of multiple witnesses and recording devices. You might want to reconsider your phrasing. The temperature in the room dropped. Evan put a hand on his cousin's shoulder, squeezed once. Lincoln stepped back, jaw tight. Miss Boone, Evan said quietly, you have no idea what you're refusing, or what you're inviting. Then I guess we'll all find out together. He held my gaze for 3 more seconds, then turned and walked out. Lincoln followed, along with their City Hall companions. The door closed behind them with a sound like punctuation. In the silence that followed, Mrs. Rivers started clapping. Slow, deliberate, each clap echoing through the nave. Father Tom joined her. Then Z, then the engineering professor, then everyone, until the whole cathedral filled with applause that sounded like thunder. I sat down hard on the organ bench, legs shaking, and let myself believe for just a moment that we might actually pull this off. The next 72 hours moved with the speed and chaos of a controlled demolition. Officer Quinto expedited the evidence logging. Every document, every photograph, every frame of video got catalogued with timestamps and witness signatures. She called in a favor from the county prosecutor, who took one look at the utility, company letters, and made a phone call that I wasn't privy to, but that resulted in the emergency injunction being quietly withdrawn within 6 hours. Someone downtown decided this wasn't a fight worth having in an election year, Quinto told me. But that doesn't mean it's over. It just means it's shifted, I understood. The legal battle was just beginning. But we had time now, and Visibility.z's video went live at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. By midnight, it had 40,000 views. By morning, 400,000. News outlets picked it up. NPR called. A technology podcast wanted an interview. Someone started a Wikipedia page for Sister Magdalene Shaw, pulling together biographical details that had been scattered and forgotten. The engineering professor brought colleagues. They examined the battery with equipment I couldn't name, took measurements, ran models. On the 3rd day, they issued a preliminary report confirming the technology was viable, reproducible, and represented a significant missed opportunity in energy storage development that warrants immediate further investigation. I made copies of everything, sent them to journalists, to universities, to open-source hardware communities, to anyone who asked with credentials that seemed legitimate. Some went to the Library of Congress, some went to the local historical society, some went to Mrs. Rivers, who kept them in a fireproof safe she'd owned since 1987, for occasions exactly like this one, though I never thought I'd see it. Father Tom reached out to the diocese. They were horrified, or at least performed horror convincingly. A Monsignor came to meet with me, expressing deep regret that the sisters' work had been mishandled and offering the Church's full support in honoring their legacy appropriately. I thanked him and filed his promises under action speak. Louder than words, the breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. A woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who ran a community energy cooperative in Pittsburgh, contacted me through Z's YouTube channel. She'd seen the video. She'd read the documentation. She had funding from a sustainable development grant and access to lab space at Carnegie Mellon, the same university where Sister Magdalene had earned her doctorate 48 years ago. If you're serious about open sourcing this, she said on our first video call, we can help. We've got engineers, we've got community partners, and we've got a track record of building distributed energy systems that actually serve neighborhoods instead of extracting from them. What's the catch? No catch. We work cooperative. Community ownership model. Any improvements get shared, any profits get reinvested locally. The only requirement is that it stays open. No patents, no exclusive licenses, no corporate buyouts. That's exactly what Sister Magdalene wanted. I know. I read her notes. She was doing cooperative economics before most of us knew the term. Dr. Chen smiled. Let's finish what she started. The city issued a temporary historic preservation designation for the cathedral while cultural significance is assessed. Translation: nobody could bulldoze it while the lawyers figured out what to do. Officer Quinto's investigation into the parish closure irregularities expanded to include document review going back to 1979. Link Voss suddenly remembered pressing business out of state. Evan Voss hired 3 different law firms, and Mrs. Rivers pulled me aside one afternoon in early November, when the first snow was threatening and the light came through the stained glass at an angle that made everything look possible. "You did good, girl," she said, gripping her cane. "Maggie would be proud, not just of what you found, of what you chose to do with it. I just refuse to sell out. That's rarer than you think." She patted my arm. "Now comes the harder part. Keeping it going, keeping it true, making sure it actually helps the people it's supposed to help." "I know. Good, because I'm going to hold you to it." She smiled, sharp as ever. "I've got another 10 years in me, minimum. I plan to spend them making sure you don't get soft." I laughed, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. Spring came to the River City the way it always did, grudgingly, with false starts and late freezes that killed the optimistic crocuses. But by April, the cathedral had transformed into something Sister Magdalene might have recognized, but never imagined. We called it the Magdalene Energy Commons. The nave became a classroom. Engineering students from the community college ran workshops on battery design. High school kids learned soldering and circuit theory. Dr. Chen's cooperative set up a small production lab in the basement, the same rooms where the sisters had worked 47 years ago, building refined versions of the ceramic cells with modern materials, but Sister Magdalene's fundamental design. The organ played every Sunday, powered by an array of prototype cells that the students maintained as part of their practicum. Mrs. Rivers directed the community choir again, her cane keeping time against the floor, her voice leading others the way it had for 4 decades. Father Tom served as community liaison, finally free of the guilt that had bent his shoulders for so long. Z interned with the production lab, filming the process and posting tutorials that got picked up by maker communities worldwide. Their subscriber count hit 500,000. More importantly, they smiled more. The restless grief that had driven them started transforming into something purposeful, something that honored the loss instead of running from it. The first residential installation happened in May. A block 3 streets over, houses that had struggled with power bills during winter. We installed a small microgrid powered by the Magdalene cells, stored in a weatherproof box, painted with a mural that showed Sister Magdalene in her lab coat and habit, smiling over her work. The system powered 6 houses. Electricity bills dropped by 60%. When the summer heat wave hit and the main grid struggled, that block stayed cool and bright. The second installation went in a week later. Then a third. By July, we had a waiting list. The utility company filed legal challenges. They lost most of them. Public sentiment had shifted. Journalists kept digging, finding more evidence of suppression, more examples of technology blocked, not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. Evan Voss resigned from the board of Voss Energy, citing family health concerns. Link Voss faced charges related to property intimidation and evidence tampering. The proceedings were ongoing, but Officer Quinto attended every hearing with a satisfaction that suggested justice, though slow, was moving. The university formally apologized to Sister Magdalene's surviving family and established a scholarship in her name for women studying energy technology. They also quietly changed some policies about corporate partnerships and community research. Small steps, but movement nonetheless. On a warm Saturday in August, we held the formal dedication of the Magdalene Commons. The mayor came, looking uncomfortable but politically necessary. Dr. Chen gave a speech about cooperative ownership and community resilience. Father Tom offered a blessing that he admitted afterward he'd written and rewritten 17 times, trying to get the words right. Mrs. Rivers simply said, "About damn time," and everyone laughed. I stood in the nave afterward, watching kids run between the pews while their parents examined the prototype displays, listening to conversations about voltage and ceramics and neighborhood power, and felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't known was unsettled. I'd bought a cathedral for $100, thinking I was saving a building. What I'd actually saved was a future that had been waiting 17 years to arrive. Or maybe I hadn't saved it. Maybe I'd just been the person standing in the right place when the secret finally couldn't stay buried anymore. Stewardship over ownership. That was the lesson written into every ceramic cell, every open-source specification, every workshop held in these rooms. Sister Magdalene had understood it. She'd built a technology and then given it away, hidden it where someone would eventually find it and choose to share it rather than sell it. I'd almost failed that test. $12 million was a lot of money, but the look on Z's face when the first microgrid powered up was worth more. The sound of Mrs. Rivers's choir singing in a space that had been silent for too long was worth more. The knowledge that kids in this neighborhood would grow up with power they could afford was worth more. Some discoveries are too important to own. They belong to everyone, or they don't really exist at all. Officer Quinto found me as the dedication was winding down. Thought you should know. The prosecutor's office is looking at expanding the investigation. Turns out the Voss family has been managing a lot of energy-related property acquisitions over the years. Your case opened doors. Good. Also, there's been interest from the National Park Service. They're considering a historic designation for the building. Something about technological heritage sites and preserving the memory of overlooked innovators. She smiled. You'd still own it, technically, but you'd have resources for maintaining it properly. I'll take that meeting. After she left, I climbed to the bell tower. I'd been meaning to do it for months, but other things kept taking priority. The stairs were still suspect, but I took them slowly, testing each board. The tower room was dusty and full of pigeons, as expected. But the view was extraordinary. I could see the whole neighborhood spread out below, the river beyond, the city skyline in the distance. Z was right. The pigeons did seem unionized. They watched me with suspicion that felt organized. I pulled out my phone, set it up for recording, and looked at the camera. So, update on the Cypress Street project, which is officially the Magdalene Energy Commons now. We've got a working lab, community workshops, and a waiting list for microgrid installations. We've got justice proceedings against the people who tried to bury this technology. And we've got proof that when you choose stewardship over ownership, you get something that actually lasts. I gestured around the bell tower. Next project, this space. The bells need restoration. The pigeons need relocation negotiations. And I'm told there's some interesting acoustics up here that might tie into Sister Magdalene's original cipher system. Should be fun. I paused, looking out over the neighborhood. Smoke rising from a barbecue somewhere. Kids playing in the street. Ordinary life, made slightly better by a battery designed 47 years ago by women the world had tried to forget. If you want more stories about finding the past and bringing it forward, literally, hit subscribe. Because this project isn't over, it's just getting started. And I promise to keep the lights on. I ended the recording and stood in the bell tower for a few more minutes, listening to the city sounds rise up through the Gothic windows. The organ began playing below, someone practicing scales. The sound resonated through the stone, through the copper pipes, through the air itself. It sounded like the building was breathing. But this time I knew what it was. Not haunt or mystery or suppression, just science and stubbornness and hope, built to outlast the people who tried to silence it. Some instruments play you, the coffee vendor had said. He was right. But this one played for all of us now, and would keep playing long after we were gone, powered by ceramic and conviction and the determined gift of a woman who believed the future deserved better than the past. was willing to give it. I climbed back down to the nave, to the work that waited, to the community that was building. Something new from something old. I'd bought a cathedral for $100. What I'd found inside was priceless, and I'd made sure it always would be. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.